How's it going, everybody? I wanted to do another video on AP Macroeconomics and just kind of hit some of the major themes for AP Macro as it's in the second week of AP testing. And so I'm going to be referencing a lot of things on our class site, on the hub, on the AP exam review folder, and you'll see some of the resources there that I'll be referencing. Or everything I'm talking about is on there. But first, just a quick refresher and reminder. Hopefully you saw the AP government video that I posted before this. Likewise on this, if you have questions, put them in the comments. Email me at stelez1@houstonist.org or come to the review sessions. This test is on Wednesday, May 10th. I will be doing review sessions both that Monday and Tuesday after school to prepare for it. So come with questions. My methods stay the same as with the last one. You don't know what you don't know until you actually test yourself. And you have to get in, and I recommend taking one of these practice exams that I've posted, and particularly the 2015 one, the most recent one, and actually going through it and then taking the wrong answers. Once you've checked the answer keys in there and labeling where this came from, what unit, what concept, what vocab word did that involve that I got wrong, and then use that as your study list. Do not use you don't use the study list as I'm gonna go unit 1, unit 2, unit 3. No, don't do that, because you're not going to do it. It's not all. You can do it. You can go from first page to last page and cram through the entire thing, but you're not going to retain anything. And you're wasting your time, because there's a lot of stuff you already know. You know a lot more than you think you do. Okay, enough of that. I went over a lot of that in AP Government, but let's just kind of switch gears now. Instead of a 50-50 test, this is a test where the multiple choice is valued a lot more. In fact, you're looking at 2/3, so 66% of this test is the multiple choice. You do have longer for it, right? So we have 60 questions, but we have a total of 70 minutes. Remember, on government, you only had 45 minutes for 60 questions. So we have the same number of questions, but we've gone from 45 up to 70, extra 25 minutes. That's a big difference. So it gives you more time to go through these questions a lot more methodically. It also tells you that these questions are going to involve a little bit more thinking. There's either going to be a lot more prompts or a lot more graphs or images or something you're going to have to think about, not just straight recall type questions. There is still an FRQ section. Remember that we have 1 long, 2 short FRQs. That makes up the final third of your grade. Don't overlook that, because that final third can be the difference. I mean, really is the difference. I expect y'all to hit a home run on the FRQs, because it's all about the graphs. All about the graphs. You know those graphs, you can do well on the writing section, I'm telling you right now. Because the writing section in AP Macro is graphs. Yes, there's actual writing having to explain, but the heart of it is the graphs and then being able to extend and explain those graphs. But you can't even begin to extend and explain and move those graphs unless you know how to draw the graphs and set them up, which is why I emphasize that at the end of this year, making sure we can set up every graph to start, axis labeled, curves labeled, all correctly, and ready to go. That's half the battle, and it's going to earn you probably the first part of the points on any FRQ. Okay, so a couple things that I've just that I've put for you on the website. This is on the class site on the hub. The first one is that most important document of the course. It's that summary of all of our graphs, and so that's the number 1 document. I mean, it's 5 pages. That 5 pages, if you truly have mastered those 5 pages, you can get a 3 on this test. All right, so I'm gonna use this review video to go through those 5 pages primarily. And use that as my base. Instead of going unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, and so on, I'm not going to go in that order. I'm going to use that document, and I'm going to extend upon that, because I think that's the most important. I've also put, just like with government, I put 2 sets of really good flashcards from Quizlet that are good just for basic drilling, making sure I'm getting some terms down. You can do casually, you can start and stop, etc. I've put in some, what I would call basically my version, my Spark Notes, if you will. It's still like 80 or 90 pages. It's a huge PDF document, but it's a lot shorter than a 500-page textbook. And it's my summary of a lot of the general things. It says AP Macro Semester Notes, and that's on there. We then have 3 full-length practice exams. Okay, I'm telling you guys, this is the best way to study. Do the exams. Because in those exams, I've given you the answer keys, and I've also given you the rubrics of how those FRQs are going to be graded. I recommend coming into my review sessions. You can do any one, but I would say start with the most recent one, the 2015 exam. And just like with government, going through it, doing it, the whole thing, then grading yourself, checking yourself, and let's bring in the list of all the things that you got wrong. You've gone through the topics and everything, and let's say you've gone over that list, and there are still some things that are just bugging you. That's how I'm going to help you. Okay, we're going to get down to those things. Okay, let's go over this. Go over the course, a couple things here, and look at. So, general advice I give you: you have a little bit more time on the multiple choice, so take it. Right? Don't rush through this. There's no point. Okay, nice and steady. You got more than a minute per question. Okay, so yes, if you get to about a minute and it's still taking you time, especially on those shorter questions, move on. But you're not in much of a rush. Okay, you're okay. On the FRQ section, okay. Remember that you basically you have an hour. Okay, you have an hour. You have one long, two short FRQs. I would break it down roughly like that. Your short FRQ should take about 15 minutes each, and give yourself a solid half hour on that long FRQ. Make sure you're being very methodical, because remember, all these FRQs, both short and long FRQs, they oftentimes tend to build on one another. So it will say in part B or C, in part C, based on the answer that you indicated in part B, what is that? Well, if you screwed up B, it doesn't matter what you put in C, it's going to be wrong. So you got to be very careful. So AP Eco writing is a lot shorter, and doesn't involve as much writing, but I think it's more, what makes it difficult is it's more precise. You have to be very mathematical and step by step, okay? Because just like in a math equation, you mess up one part of the equation, you're not going to get the right answer, and so you got to work your way through it. All right, graphs. Okay, number one, production possibilities frontier. Okay, our production possibilities frontier is the most basic concept of a graph because it illustrates those basic concepts of scarcity and opportunity cost. It's a graph where it only measures two goods, right? You got your capital, consumer goods, or product A, product B. You're either going to make this or make that. Yes, we go in the real world. Every economy makes hundreds of thousands of different goods. But for the purpose of studying, or for illustrating the concept, we're going to look at for pretending the economy can only make two things. We then plot those combinations on that curve, on that arc, okay? And that represents the production possibilities frontier, the absolute limit of what we can make, okay? So any combination, we can choose to make more of this or more of that, but we're somewhere on the line, we are being efficient. We're utilizing all of our resources. Remember what those resources are, also known as our factors of production. They are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. If we gain or lose any of those things, the entire curve is going to either go out if we gain or shrink if we lose. Our capabilities have been changed. If you lose half your population, you cannot make as much. All right? If you gain and your country doubles in size and land, you can make a lot more. Okay? Now, what happens to other points on this graph? Well, if a point is not on the curve, if it's inside the curve, it means that that's a possible combination. You're choosing to make this amount of that, this amount of this, but you're not using all your resources. You could make even more. All right, you're underutilizing. You're being underutilized, and this would be represented by a recession. Your unemployment rate's gone up. You have land that's not being utilized. For whatever reason, there's bad things going on that are preventing you from being effective. A point beyond the curve is that unattainable point. You don't have all the resources to get there today. Now, here's the trick I told you. It is possible to have a point just outside the curve. Because just going back to unemployment, right? The natural rate of unemployment is 4 to 5%. Is it possible to have only 1% unemployment? Sure. Is it good? No, because you're not going to have the opportunity to grow. That would be represented by a point outside the curve. Okay, that you're doing it, but you're overworking your economy, and that's what we call expansionary or inflationary. Remember, I told you how you can show the same economic condition at full employment, beyond full employment, or under full employment, below full employment, or a recession, on 4 graphs. This graph being one of them. Then our ADAS graph, Phillips curve graph, and what else did I do it on? The business cycle graph. And so we can show graphically the same thing on multiple graphs. Next, we had our basic supply and demand. We're talking about just one product, one good or service. We have price on the Y, quantity on the X, and we put supply and demand as our X. We put demand the way we did it, sloping downward, because we all agreed that as price lowers, we tend to buy more. Now, does that mean if something's cheap, everybody wants it? No, there's other factors. There's taste and preferences, I think. But the point is, generally, people can afford more and therefore will buy more stuff at lower prices. Remember, economic demand is not just wanting something, but also having the ability to pay for it. Okay. Supply, there's an opposite incentive. You want the lowest price as a consumer. You're the demander. But as a business, you want to make as much profit as possible. So you want to sell your item at the highest price possible, which is why we have an upward sloping, positive sloping supply curve. At higher prices, suppliers are willing to supply more because that is a lucrative business they can make money on. So we, the demanders, keep the suppliers and each other in check. And X marks the spot, because at X marks the spot, at equilibrium, they're making a good amount of money and a profit. We are paying a reasonable price, and everybody's relatively happy. That was basic supply and demand. Next, with the business cycle. Okay, not really a graph, more of a model, in that we have a constant trending upward line. The economy is always consistently growing at a pretty consistent rate. Are there some years where we dip down? Yes. But overall, we are much bigger today than we were 100 years ago and than we were 200 years ago. Now, along that average, that medium, that upward sloping line, we have had wild ups and downs. We've had recessions, Great Depressions, we've had expansions and huge inflationary periods, and that's the business cycle, right? Your basic business cycle, you'll start if let's say we start at a peak, we're at the height of our economy, we then have a recessionary period where we start to obviously see a loss in GDP. We bottom out at the trough, we hit rock bottom, so to speak, of a recessionary period, and then we start upward and expanding again. And the point is that peak here and the next peak are going to be slightly higher. That's what creates that upward trending line. Each peak is just a little bit higher. For example, this year, I believe current data says we're on track to grow at about 2%, which is our average. Okay, which has been the historical average. It's a lot better than it's been before in recent years, but that's the historical average. So understanding on the line, if you're going that up and down cycle, when it hits the line, that's at full employment. Below it, you're in a recession or below full employment. You get back up to that peak, you're now in an expansionary or an inflationary state. We then had the king of all graphs, aggregate demand, aggregate supply. So now we're not going to just demand and supply of just one good or service. We're going to demand and supply for everything in the economy. Okay. And so we have, instead of quantity on the x-axis, we have the quantity of everything. And how we represent that is real GDP on the x-axis. And instead of just price of one thing, we have the general price level of everything. So we have price level on the y-axis. We then have a demand curve, just like we had on last one. So this one's aggregate demand. So it includes the demand for everything, which is represented by GDP. So remember, aggregate demand components are C, I, G, and XN. Consumers and spending, investment spending, government spending, and net exports. Next, we have short-run aggregate supply, which is the interest, just like going upward, your interest of businesses and suppliers. And then we have the long-run aggregate supply, which is that vertical line down the middle. Why is that significant? That vertical line represents equilibrium. That's that long-run trend line back on the business cycle graph. At that long-run aggregate supply, we're at natural unemployment, 4 to 5%. Natural growth, 1 to 3%. Natural inflation, 2 to 3%. Everything's nice and neat. Whenever the X intersects beyond it, to the right, we are inflationary. Behind it, we're in a recession. So understand how all those curves move, the factors that go through them. I want to go through that. And that sheet does go through that, the shifters of each one. We then had some three very specific graphs when it came to concepts. We have the money market graph for monetary policy with a vertical supply line, not the slanted supply line, a vertical supply line, because the Federal Reserve, which makes monetary policy, sets the money supply precisely at where it needs to be. The demand is the demand of all of us in the economy. You follow expansionary monetary policy, therefore you increase the money supply, you'll have the money supply curve shift right, outward, positive. Likewise, contractionary policy, you're going to be negative and shift inward. What's on the axis? Well, obviously the amount of money I just said is on the x-axis. That's why we're shifting the line, the vertical line back and forth. But on the y-axis is our nominal interest rate. It's our interest rate. The interest rate is the price of money, basically. And so the price to hold on or to use money, okay, is there. There's a price to everything in economics in this world. That is where you need to remember your monetary policy tools. So remember, we drew the chart for expansionary and contractionary. We did this for monetary and fiscal policy, with monetary being the Federal Reserve. So our big three, as I said, were to make for expansionary policy was buying bonds or securities, decreasing the required reserve ratio, or decreasing the discount rate, also known as the federal funds rate. You flip those around, and that's contractionary policy. Okay, so make sure you're clear, you're cool with those, that you're comfortable with those, and that's the big thing there. Next, we have loanable funds. The loanable funds graph was associated with fiscal policy because it involves government spending. Fiscal policy involved either government spending or tax policy, taxes, right? If you want to do expansionary policy, you lower taxes to get people to spend money, or you yourself increase your spending as the government. Do the reverse for contractionary. But when you increase spending, we said the problem is we've already been in debt. How are you going to, if you're lowering taxes already, or you're already in debt, how are you going to spend money? Well, you got to borrow. And that's where loanable funds comes in. The government is one of the biggest players in the demand for loanable funds. We demand loanable funds too, right? We demand loans for college, loans for cars, loans for homes. But the government's one of the biggest players. They come to the same table as we do to get that money to borrow. The supply of that loanable funds comes from how much money you and I and businesses have locked up in our banks and in our banking system and locked away that we're not currently using, that's available to be loaned out. So when the government, one of the biggest concepts was crowding out. When we do expansionary fiscal policy and the government demands more loanable funds because they need to borrow that money to do expansionary fiscal policy, that's fine, but it shifts the demand curve so far that it increases the interest rate. Remember, just like on the last graph, interest rate is also on the y-axis, the price of money. The price of money has gotten so high that banks are going to charge more for a loan in terms of interest. So you and I now can't buy that home because interest rates have gone up. We can't go to college right now because it's too expensive. We need that loan. Businesses can't expand and go to that other location because they can't get a business loan because it's too expensive. So that's where inadvertently, by trying to help the economy by expanding their own spending through expansion of fiscal policy, that can actually hurt. Does it happen all the time? No, but it's a pretty common thing that does happen. So once again, understanding both curves, how they move, and be able to set it up and label it. There is one graph in there we didn't talk about as much, and that's investment demand, but it's pretty logical that it has the interest rate. It's the same concept we've been talking about, what I just talked about with loans, that businesses are going to invest more at lower interest rates. At lower interest rates, you're more, and you need to borrow the money, you're more willing to expand and go open up that new location as a business. That's all the investment demand curve is talking about. Next, we have foreign exchange. That's the most recent graph, comparing the value of two currencies with each other. Remember, this one really depends on how the question is asked. Okay, they will tell you straightforward in terms of blank. Whatever blank is, you're doing your whole graph in. Show the impact on the exchange rate, the impact on the U.S. dollar involving the exchange rate between the U.S. dollar to euro. Okay, we're doing it in terms of dollars, and so you have quantity of whatever you're talking about on the x-axis, and you have the exchange rate, and the exchange rate is the other currency over the currency you're talking about, because we wanted in that case how many euros can we get for every $1 in the base. And then you have the supply and demand for that currency you're talking about, in that case, dollars. So don't think about how people want the other currency. Okay, so understanding why people would want currency, what conditions, and what could shift either one. Remember, this is also one of those graphs where there are multiple right answers. In other words, a increase in demand would be the same thing as a decrease in supply, because both result in an appreciation or a hiring of a raising of the value of the exchange rate. Next, we have our Phillips curve. So on the x-axis, you have unemployment. On the y-axis, you have inflation. And we have the long-run Phillips curve, which is vertical. It hits the x-axis at the natural rate of unemployment. And you have the short-run curve that shows the short-run relationship, which is showing that as the unemployment rate goes up. This is the one graph that doesn't follow the left-right rule, where right is positive and left is negative. It's actually flipped because of how the axes are labeled. As I go out on the x-axis or out to the right, unemployment is getting higher. And so beyond that long-run line, which hits at 4 to 5%, My unemployment rate is now not healthy. It's much higher than it should be. That is a recession. So a point on the short run curve beyond the long run curve, okay, to the right is actually a bad thing. That's a recession. Inside, yes, you are now below the natural rate of unemployment, so more people get jobs. This is an expansionary period. But the problem is that as more people get jobs and more people are making more money, the prices for everything go up because companies can afford to charge you more now. So that's the give and take. Do you want more people to have jobs and to have higher prices? Or do you want lower prices? That means people aren't going to have jobs. Because if you lower the prices, companies don't make as much money. If I'm not making as much money as a company, I'm going to stop hiring people. Because I don't need as many people if I'm only going to make this much money. So that's the trade-off, and the Phillips curve shows that relationship. I mentioned it briefly, but you didn't have to worry about it too much, and that was the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve was showing the relationship between taxes, tax revenue, and tax rate. The basic idea is there is such a thing as too much taxes. Because if you overtax your population, you will start seeing a decline in tax revenue and tax profit because people will stop working. If you go and tax 80% of my income, what incentive do I have to work? Forget that. I'm going to go try and make money some other way. Okay? I'm going to make it, black market type stuff, under the table. I don't want you to tax me because you're taking 80%. All right? So there's too much taxes. The final page of that review sheet shows our major formulas. It does show monetary and fiscal policy, so the chart I was talking about, and the tools. And then finally, the formulas that you need to know. Let's go through them real fast, and that'll be the end of this video. We have our GDP formula, so C plus I plus G plus XN. We have NPC and NPS, right? And NPC and NPS must always equal 1 because you either consume or you save. There is no other option. You either use it or use it or don't use it. That's it, okay? And with that, we use that in the multiplier, the spending multiplier formula, which was 1 over NPS. Now, let's say they don't give you NPS. They only give you NPC. Guess what? You already have NPS. Because if I give you NPC, just find the difference to 1 because they have to add 1. So I give you an NPC of 0.8. You know that NPS must be 0.2, so it must add up to 1. So 1 over NPS gives you your spending multiplier. In other words, how many times can money be cycled or spent in the economy before it works its way out of the system? So when I spend $1, if the multiplier is 5, that dollar will be spent, in theory, 5 times over before it is taken out of the system. Okay? Because there's a chunk being taken out each time, and then it gets down to 0. Imagine throwing an object like a rock or something in a pond and the ripple effect. That's what it is. Eventually it will smooth back out and go back to nothing, but it's going to have those ripples going out. That's what's going on. We can use that to see the true impact of any sort of government spending or spending by you and me in the economy. There was also the tax multiplier, which is negative because, remember, taxes take money away from the system, and that was NPC over NPS, so divide the two, and it's negative. We also had our multiplier for the banking system. So how much is money used in the banking system? And that was 1 divided by the required reserve ratio. So if the required reserve ratio is 10%, which is 0.1, 1 divided by 0.1 is 10. And that tells me that the money will make its way through the banking system 10 times before it goes to 0. Because banks are going to loan out money. When they loan out money, that person spends it on whatever, and it makes its way into another bank. And that bank loans out a portion, and so on and so forth each time until that 10% takes each chunk out to 0. And that's pretty much it for formulas. You're not going to see any other math on there. It's just understanding that. You do not have a calculator on this test. I know you all know that by now. But the numbers are going to be nice and simple. It can be done in your head or very quickly on paper, and you'll be fine. Okay, that concludes AP Macroeconomics. I just want to go over some general things. Once again, if you got questions, put them in the comments. Send me an email at steles1@houstonicity.org. Bring up the question in class. Come to one of my review sessions on the 2 days prior, on the 8th and 9th, that Monday, and Tuesday before the Wednesday test. This is an afternoon exam, so it'll be starting at noon. Once again, don't overthink things. Don't do this. Don't cram for it. Nice and steady. It's going to win the race. Okay, I hope this helped. If you make sure you also watch the previous video if you didn't already on AP US Government. And next I'll be posting a video for AP US History for the juniors, STAR and AP US History. Appreciate it.